All right. Very cool. I have to say I love this conference. I've had the joy of speaking here before. I gave lending privilege at a few conferences before Lead Dev New York, but I don't think I gave it better than I did at that conference. I don't know, just the environment. And you know, I love working in technology. I love building software. And I'm sure that many of the people who are here, you're here because you love building software as well. I love the community, I love the creativity, I even love the culture, even though it can be problematic, but I love working in tech. And there's just something about turning ones and zeros into value for end users. And you know, the journalistic world has also caught up to the fact that tech is cool, right? We had the mythology of a couple of guys in a garage who build these multi-billion-dollar companies, and we also have the current thrill that anyone can build an app that everyone can have in their pockets on their phones and use for hours and hours a day. We all have that power with current development. However, there's a dark side to working in tech that does not get a lot of coverage in the media. Building software can be exhausting. It can be really tough. I'm sure many of you have felt that exhaustion. You felt some of the stresses of working in this industry. And people are often surprised by that because, I mean, we're not like the construction industry where you're like making buildings and having manual labor, but there is a cost to working in development. There's a mental burden that is placed on us because we choose to work in this field. And this industry places so many demands on us. There's technology, which is always changing. And it's always tough to know if the skills we know today will work tomorrow. I mean, the previous speaker mentioned the alphabet soup. We're adding letters to the alphabet all the time. There's always new technologies and there's new things that we have to figure out. And then, of course, there's the never-ending push to always be shipping. You've heard that phrase before, always be shipping. And I've used that term before to motivate my teams. You know, if we ship this software, if we ship this release that's full of all this value, then we prove our value to the organization. And so we say always be shipping, always try to keep code running through our pipelines. But any system that is always on will eventually fail. Any system that you don't take offline and tend to is going to fall over. And there's actual research that the pressures that we put on ourselves have a cost, that people in our industry are burning out. And I stand before you as a repeat casualty of burnout in tech. You know, my wife and I manage our marriage of 17 years. We have 3 children. We have complicated work lives. We're speaking in New York City. We're from Texas. And so there's all these things that we have to manage. And so we felt the cost of working in tech. And I found that I've seen the cost as well in how it affects my teams, the people who I work with. And I've realized that if I don't regulate the burnout levels of my teams, I'm going to see it. I'm going to see it in the code we develop. I'm going to see it in the interactions that we have together. I'm going to see it show up. Because the reality is that burned out people burn out. They burn down valuable things and they leave. They go out of the organization often, right? Often they burn down architectures because they start installing all these frameworks because they're so burned out and depressed that they wanted to distract themselves from it. So they'll download all these tools and these frameworks that aren't even on their technical roadmap. They'll burn down quality because they'll begin to introduce more and more bugs into production over time as burnout begins to take their toll. And they'll even burn down culture. They'll begin to argue. They'll begin to have short tempers. And they'll begin to burn down the culture of the company. But they also go out. They go out of our GitHub or whatever source control system you use, right? They make fewer commits, fewer comments on pull requests. You can almost see the data as they begin to withdraw from the social network of our company and of our teams. And they begin to withdraw from communication tools like Slack or even email. And so you'll see that burnout effect happen. Now, there's actual research that shows the effect that burnout is real, and that it even affects those of us who work in this amazing technology industry. And Aneika is going to talk more about that.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's my honor to be on stage with my handsome husband and to be welcomed back into the tech world. So being married to someone who's been in this enterprise, in this area of work for over 2 decades, and myself having been a technology consultant for many years, I can tell you that burnout is for real. It's something that I see even as a business professor, and I've studied it, and it's something close to my heart because it's something that we actually try to avoid. So we want to make sure we're on the same page and that we're all speaking the same language here, so we want to go ahead and make sure that we define what burnout is. So basically we did a lot of research and a lot of reading, and we landed with the World Psychology, or the World Psychiatry, and this is their definition. Burnout is a psychological syndrome emerging as a prolonged response to chronic interpersonal stressors on the job. The 3 key dimensions of this response are an overwhelming exhaustion, a feeling of cynicism and detachment from the job, and a sense of ineffectiveness and a lack of accomplishments. You see the word stressor there, and stressor are the things that cause you to feel stress. Stress is what you feel. So we wanted to kind of boil it down to something that, we can kind of use in everyday language. And basically, what we're talking about here is the ongoing feeling that today's resources aren't enough to meet tomorrow's demands. So basically, it's a feeling of being overwhelmed. Has anyone in here ever felt overwhelmed before? Okay, I know I have. So this is real to me. And actually, it crosses many industries, and it touches all kinds of people. We want to make sure that we kind of get down into the nuances a little bit. I am a professor, so we want to make sure that we talk about the dimensions of burnout. So let's take a look at those dimensions. The first one is emotional exhaustion. I'm not sure if anyone's ever been exhausted emotionally before, but I have, and let's look at the definition. And this is an overall lack of energy in a sense that your emotional resources are being fully consumed by the work that you do. And what that means is when you come back home after a full day of work, you have nothing left to give, not to your spouse or to your partner, to your children. You're just completely spent. The second is depersonalization, and that's where things may get a little bit dangerous. This signifies an unfeeling, cynical, or impersonal response toward the recipients of one's service. So it's kind of like if you go visit a friend at the hospital or something, or at a doctor's office, and you hear a nurse or a doctor say, "Oh, the broken leg, they're in room 2." Like, wait a minute, that now I'm not a person anymore. I'm just an object, and that's where someone is probably exhausted. And the research actually says that people who work with people and have to touch people a lot, they're more susceptible to burnout. So like military, nurses, teachers, even people in technology, consultants is what I used to do. So the third is reduced personal accomplishment. And this is marked by a tendency to evaluate oneself negatively, particularly with regard to work with clients. So what it is you begin to be overly critical of your work. And since you're so attached and engaged with your work, it begins to touch the core of who you are as a person. And so that's that personal accomplishment that's being reduced, and that's very negative for someone that really loves their work and that's really engaged. So burnout among full-time workers. I mean, this is something that's widespread. So we did some research to kind of share with you what the literature says out there. So Gallup Worldwide, they did a study, and it was a 3-part study. It was a year-long study. And it showed that burnout is a very common problem. So I want to give you some statistics. It says, in fact, that 23% of 7,500 respondents reported feeling burned out at work. Very often, or essentially all the time, they were burned out. all the time. It was never ending, and that really is what burned out is. Where 44% said they felt burned out sometimes. So this means that almost 2/3 of full-time workers experience some degree of burnout. So burnout, especially in the world that we live in today, where it's hard for us to turn off because we're always connected, it's something that's common to man, or common to the human experience. So engaged, but not burned out. So you might say, well, why did you all put that on there? Well, a lot of people felt that engagement is the antonym to burnout. So how can somebody be engaged and burned out? But the research says it's definitely the case. So you may be thinking, my team is highly engaged. Surely we can't be burned out. We love what we do at our job. We have hackathons. We have video consoles in the office. The bar is stocked with beer and other goodies. And people love hanging out here. How can we be burned out? But engagement is often seen as the opposite of burnout, as I just said. But let's look at what the University of Cambridge found. They published this article actually just last year, and they said that even highly engaged employees are subject to burnout. The article cited a study published in 2018 by Career Development International Journal, so we're getting articles from all over the place. And this is what they said. They said, interestingly, many employees appear to be optimally engaged while they are burned out and considering leaving the job. So I'm engaged, I love my job, but I'm burned out and I may be looking for a way out. So the article observed that the highest turnover intentions were reported by the highly engaged group, higher than even the unengaged group that might be commonly expected to be eyeing an exit. So here we're in a conundrum here. And the question is, why is this? Well, it's the wrath of workism, and we've been, Anjuan and I have been talking about this, and we've been listening to some podcasts on it as well. And, we love our work. We love our work, and we live in a world where work is the center of many people's lives, that everything else that happens in some people's lives, it revolves around work. And that even the dignity of who I am is tied to the work that I do. So I'm not sure, I'm sure all of us want to hire highly motivated people. Even as a professor, we just hired some people, and we want to bring people on that are highly motivated. We all want people to dig deep into their work and make sure that they're connected to it, right? However, highly motivated people often have a hard time separating who they are from what they do. In fact, if they run into trouble at work, they begin to see themselves as leading a troubled life. So some of us that are super, super engaged, trouble at work equals trouble at home or trouble in my personal life. So these are the people, this is what we're talking about. These are the people that are primed and really susceptible to burnout. So in an article in a book called Professional Burnout, Dr. Ayala Pine states that individuals who want to derive meaning, and this is really important, and gather a feeling of being significant from their work, these are the people that are most susceptible to burnout when they believe that they are not achieving this and that their work is insignificant. So if you want someone to feel burned out, you hire a motivated person, a person that's very engaged, but then you don't give them an opportunity to do work that makes them feel significant or that they're contributing something very valuable. These are the people that find themselves on the road to burnout, and at some point they begin to feel helpless, which leads to hopelessness, and the end result is burnout. So stress is a problem in software development. It just is, and it's something, it's tech burnout essentially. And you may be thinking, wow, burnout is horrible. I'm glad it's not in my industry, right? However, Blind, a popular anonymous social app, so it is anonymous, for tech employees ran a survey. And they ran it from May 12th to May 21st in 2018. And more than 11,000 users participated. Close to 60% of the respondents reported feeling burnout, and that they work for some of the and these people work for some of the leading companies in tech. Furthermore, 25% of the 30 companies represented in the survey had a burnout rate of 50% or higher. But guys, what we need to understand is that a lot of people are walking around burned out. You're burned out, but you don't know the person right next to you is burned out as well. And the leadership and management may be blind to this as well. So going further, 16 out of the 30 companies had a burnout rate higher than the survey average. So it's clear that burnout is widespread, and those of us in tech, it's something that is common to the experience, and really there is a cost associated to it. There's an individual cost. The individual cost is, number one, we're ignoring burnout It can result in physical illness, fatigue, high blood pressure. I mean, it can really touch you and your physical health. Psychological distress, sadness, irritability, anger, and it can even result in rage in some people that just literally cannot take any more. Lastly, how does the corporation get hit? Well, sick days. People are leaving and having to go to the emergency room. And I have to say, I did used to consult for Enron, and I have seen some things that we would have to talk about over lunch. But, and I wasn't working with their finances. I was implementing SAP, by the way. But it also leads to absenteeism. And so all of these things, so these symptoms add up to having a real world ramification in addition to their impact on our work and our personal lives, and ultimately it impacts the people that we love. Because we're not an island. Everything that we deal with, the people that love us, they deal with it as well. So there's corporate cost. Harvard Business School found that in 2015 that workplace stress contributes up to 8% of national spending on healthcare. And if you don't happen to know how much national spending on healthcare was in 2015, it's about $190 billion. The biggest factor in these costs were high demands at work, which is accounted for about $48 billion in spending. Furthermore, approximately 120,000 people die each year from stress. And I know that's not a happy thing to be talking about on this beautiful day or, at our time together here at this conference, but we have to understand that sometimes people pay the ultimate cost. They lay down their life in some ways for the work that they love so much. So now we want to make it clear that stress and burnout are not the same thing. Stress is one of those factors that leads to burnout. And as a professor, I talk to my students about the difference between eustress and distress. Eustress is the good kind of stress. That's the stress of challenge, where you're compelled to do well and do better. You're stretching. That's a good thing. But distress is a type of stress that takes from you, and it's too much, and it's heavy, and it's burdensome. So however, it's clear that stress and those who succumb to burnout result in costs that directly impact the bottom line of companies. Given the cost of stress and burnout, it's not surprising that it's a problem that a lot of people try to solve. And Anjuan will go over some of those common solutions next.
Wow. Billions of dollars lost. All those people dead. Is this talk about burnout or Thanos? But seriously, there are challenges with dealing with burnout. And, I knew about this, and so one good thing about working with my wife, Dr. Simmons, is that when I used to put together talks, I would just go on Wikipedia and this is facts, right? But she actually has research and rigor. So, yes. Bonus there. And because burnout is such a widespread problem, it's not surprising that there have been attempts to solve the problem. And there are two major categories that I like to talk about when it comes to how people try to solve burnout. And there are the corporate attempts and the individual attempts. So let's talk about what companies do. You know, as a speaker and as someone who is a practitioner, I've had the privilege of walking into many corporate headquarters. I've been to GitHub in San Francisco, I've been to MailChimp in Atlanta, I've been to Prezi in Budapest. So I've been all over the world, and I've walked into a lot of technology companies. And so you go in and you get these amenities like free lunch, and they have all these cool games, and it just makes you feel special. It makes you feel like that you don't want to go home. You don't want to leave. And it's not uncommon for technology companies to design their offices so that developers feel like royalty. But you know, sometimes royalty winds up at the red wedding. And you know, all the espresso machines in the world and then open tab at happy hour, that's not going to help. That won't help when people really are putting back together the pieces of their lives because they are so burned out. And you know, corporations exist, and in business school, this was drilled into my head. Corporations exist to deliver value to shareholders. You've probably heard that before. Companies exist to deliver value to shareholders. And there are times when tending to the burnout needs of your people and delivering that value to shareholders conflict. And when you get into a downturn in the economy, guess what gets cut first? There are all these things that we do to help people burn out. And Aneika's going to talk more about what individuals do to try to prevent burnout.
Thank you. So what are some things that we try to do? We're given the precarious availability of help from companies. Individuals try to come up with their own solutions to burnout. All of us have probably done this. And a lot of the things that we come up with, it doesn't work. Some of us go into excess eating. You know, some of us may turn to illegal drugs. Some of us may, you know, maybe get involved in excess alcohol consumption. And these days, there's something called escapism, where we're trying to just escape from the world that we feel that we're just like chained to this computer or chained to this project. So we might try to go on some self-care vacations. And that's a good thing, right? But with the culture of social media right now, a lot of times we turn our vacation into work, because we're trying to have the perfect Instagram photo, or we try to have the perfect Snapchat or whatever. And I'm sure you guys have read in the news about people falling off the Grand Canyon trying to get the perfect picture. So you're on vacation, kinda. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to tell people, hey, look how much I'm not working, and then that becomes work. So escapism usually requires access to wealth, and honestly, a lot of us may not have that type of wealth and the resources to engage in that. So corporate efforts sometimes are undermined by concerns about the success of the business when they try to get involved and help. And individuals, their efforts are sometimes lack efficacy and accessibility for the reasons that we discussed, perhaps lacks of resources. So the solution to burnout has to lie between those who are high in the organization. Even though they're always trying to steer us, they may become distracted trying to steer the company. You could be distracted by all the things that we've been discussing. And those who are burned out at an individual level may feel like they don't have the resources as well. So that's where engineering managers come in. You're well positioned to effectively manage the stress levels of your teams as well as the stress level in your own life. So managing the burnout, burn down. So as we look for a model for addressing burnout in tech, we wanted a framework that was effective, but didn't require privilege to access. So we found a 3-part plan that we've seen work in our own lives as well as in the lives of the people that Anjuan manages. So we wanted to make something that was accessible and geared around practices that people could immediately engage. So it's something that when you leave this conference, hopefully you can immediately perhaps think about some of the solutions that we're going to discuss here. So for every part of the model, we also have a point or two for companies. Given the budget, we know people have different budget ranges, but I think there's some things here that even if you don't have this expansive budget that we can do to help people. So before we go into our model, Anjuan will tell you about the inspiration behind it. I hear it has something to do with people that build high dexterity projects or something that they utilize.
Yeah, agile.
Okay.
Agility, dexterity.
Okay.
You know, D&D versus whatever your role-playing game was. So yeah, I worked a lot in agile projects. And I found that the burnout chart is a great way to track my team's progress, but I think it's a great metaphor for understanding burnout. Now, if you haven't heard of a burnout chart, let me do a quick 10-second refresher. So we have kind of the x-axis, the y-axis. The x-axis is time, y-axis is work. In this example, we have roughly 50 points of work to do, and that can be hours if you're crazy, or story points if you're like me. And so the idea is that over time, the team has the ideal line, right? We're going to come back to this in a little bit. So the ideal line is what happens if you perfectly finish the work throughout the course of the sprint. And then as the team works, they eventually work on the project. And so here we see that start with 50 and you're like, okay, you're below the ideal line, you're kind of ahead of schedule. Then, oh, wait a minute, now you're on schedule, now you're a little bit behind schedule because you're above the ideal line, right? That's how these burn down charts work. And working with a lot of burn down charts and being up late at night, trying to grok these burn down charts and wondering what's going to happen, maybe realize one night that, this is a great way of thinking about, as an engineering manager, I have to do more than just burn down work, right? I have to burn down three things. I have to burn down barriers that my team is under. I have to burn down distractions, and I also have to burn down illness. And I think it's going to cover burning down the barriers that exist often next.
Thank you. So, burning down barriers with relationships. I like this picture because, eye contact is a powerful thing and people are looking at each other and listening. Sometimes people just want to be heard. But anyway, we all need a small group of people to help us walk through lives and the challenges of life. Some of us may call it our village. And it's become cliche, but I'm sure you guys have heard the saying, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, let's go together. So in our research into burnout, we've seen human relationships can be one of the main ways that we can protect ourselves against burnout. And as engineering managers, it's vital that we burn down the barriers between us and our teams, or leaders and their teams. You should include your teams in solving problems, especially those that affect what the team is working on next, basically building buy-in. Let them be a part of the discussion, not just telling people what to do, but being engaged, involved together. We can also foster an environment where we have open discussions among team members, and maybe even a way to share some ideas in an anonymous way, or not in a way that would make people feel uncomfortable. Furthermore, it's important to let our teams know the outcomes of their proposed solutions and ideas, even when it's not something that they wanted to do. So we don't just throw that away. We want to make sure that they know why and how we're moving forward. And these are some of the low-cost ways that we can encourage one another to not experience burnout. Number one, we can privately give people praise. If they don't want it to be public, you got to get to know the people you work with. You could write them a little note that might be helpful. We can incentivize socializing around shared interests, and some things that companies can do if you do have a little bit of a budget. You can give out gift cards that can only be utilized if more than one person is engaging in the experience or in the purchase. So it's just kind of building that community and helping people feel that they're supported and that they're not alone.
All right, so after you burn down barriers, you have to burn down distractions. Your attention is a finite thing. And in this world where there's Twitter and Instagram and there's always something going off in your pocket, some notification, it's hard to understand that your attention is finite. But we spend it on all these things that really don't provide value. And so to really harness our attention, that scarce resource, is very important that we understand what are our values. What are the things that we really care about? And we really harness our attention on those things. So it's very important that we help ourselves, that we begin to make sure that we're focused as we work on what's really important, and then we help our teams understand how they can focus as well. We have to learn the power of no. No can be a very powerful word, but the challenge is that we work in technology, so we're highly capable people, and highly capable people like to do stuff. So it's very important that we understand that we have to see where we're best aligned, what stuff that we do is best aligned with what we really care about, and we really try to get rid of the rest. And companies that they're willing to be engaged can do certain things like remote work. My current company, I can work remotely, but I can also come into the office. I get so much work done when I'm not in the office, when there's not people coming up and say, hey, I see you at your desk, can I run something by you? I guess. So it's really important that we try to foster an environment where people can really be focused at work. And Aneika is going to talk about burning down illness next.
Right. We want to make sure that we burn down illness, because I believe there's a quote that says that health is the true wealth, right? What can we do if we don't have our health? So software developers often trade their health for productivity, but this often results in a future loss of productivity that outweighs whatever was temporarily gained. And basically that just means a lot of us use our youth and our strength to perform well and accumulate a lot of wealth. And then when we get older, we use a lot of our wealth to try to get our health back, right? So burnout takes a physical toll on us, but if we improve our health, perhaps we can have a barrier or something that can help us resist that. So what are some things we can do? We can know our sleep cycle. How much sleep do we require? How many people in here are getting enough sleep? Hey, right? We can stay hydrated throughout the day. It's important to get regular exercise and improve our nutrition. And we hear people talking about, eat clean, right? There's also mental health through meditation, and we're talking about mindfulness these days, perhaps keeping a daily journal. And, even an organization, perhaps you can have like a team yoga day or something. You go do yoga, or you pay for gym memberships. And one of my favorites is designated no work times. You could say, hey, from 7 to 9, no working. It's mandatory. We want you to spend some time with your family or things that you enjoy doing. So we've covered a lot, and Anjuan will talk about how we're going to balance everything out.
Yeah, I mentioned the burn down chart, and one of the things I love about burn down charts is the ideal line, right? The idea that if you're below the line, you're on target. If you're above, you're behind. But I've learned that, and I used to be obsessed with this thing, keeping my team beneath the ideal line. But I've learned that, there is a tolerance range that I can detect because I know my teams, that, we may be above the line, but we can recover. Now that tolerance zone gets narrow as we get to the end of the sprint, but it's a great way to understand, even though we may be right now above the line, that we're gonna be okay. The same thing applies to burnout. Same thing applies to stress. You may feel that, I'm really stressed, and there might be times where you can't really deal with distractions, or you can't take care of your health, or you are feeling isolated. That's okay if you know that I'm going to make sure that I get to a place where I can tend to my health, both physically and mentally later. So if you understand the ideal line in burnout, you can know that you can temporarily be going through a hard time and know that I need to schedule a lot of self-care later. And it's about balance and the fact that, we're not going to ever perfectly balance the work that we do in building software, and burnout won't be perfectly balanced as well. But if we interrogate the reality of our lives, then we'll be better able to detect when we're kind of away from where we need to be and make corrective actions.
Okay. So this is the end here, and what we really want to make sure is that we end on a call to action. So as engineering managers, you're perfectly positioned to model ways of managing stress. So how you manage it will impact how your team members manage it and the people that work for you. And if you help your teams protect their hearts, their minds, and their bodies, you'll help your organization be more productive and foster an environment of innovation. We all need innovation for a competitive advantage and for organizations to even survive. So building software requires motivated individuals and teaching your teams to reach out, remove distractions, and take time to renew themselves. And this will improve what your team can deliver. And when I believe that healthy teams make healthy code. So we'll be rooting for you as you burn down the stressors that burden your team so that you can be the best version of who you are at work and at home. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.